Okay, so now that we've looked at, how do you figure out if it's going to open up or open down, let's look at, well, how many solutions could this have? I'm just going to rewrite the general form of a quadratic equation up here. It's ax squared plus bx plus c. And so, like I mentioned earlier, this exponent of 2 means that all quadratics may have up to 2 possible solutions. It can't have more than 2, and basically what I mean by solution is x-intercept. How many times does it cross the x-axis? Where does it cross the x-axis? So that's something to consider. Okay, so here is a picture of 3 different types of scenarios. Now they're all opening upwards, but this could also be true if they're opening downwards. Just for these pictures, I chose simple parabolas that open upwards, or they're concave up. So I am going to mark my solutions on the graph itself. So I'm looking for an x-intercept. That's what I mean by solutions. So I'm going to mark it. Here's one, and here is the other right here. Maybe make it a little bit darker and larger. There you go. Okay, so these are the words that you need to associate with this. I can call them, I didn't say this earlier, I can call them zeros, I can call them roots, or I can call them solutions. And the reason why I included all 3 words here is because I can use, and anybody that's testing you and anybody that's going to assess you, they don't have to tell you, well, do you want a root, or like, what do you mean by roots or solutions? We're going to expect that you know that I can use any of these 3 words and ask you for the same thing. I could ask you, what's the zero? I could ask you, what's the root? Or what's the solution? And all 3 mean basically the points that we just marked on here. They're the x-intercepts. Now, if I'm asking you for a root or solution, you just have to give me these numbers. Okay, so let's start from the left side. This is -5. And this one is +2. Okay, now that's all I want from you, but this is important. You need to use braces when writing this down. Okay, because that means, okay, on the x-axis at -5 and on the x-axis at 2, those are my solutions, or my points. Now, if I ask you for an x-intercept, that means I really want an ordered pair. I want you to actually tell me the coordinates of those zeros. And so this would be -5, 0. That's one of them. And this would also include the other point, which is 2, 0. These parentheses and these braces, you got to be careful here. Because if you were to put braces here, to me, that sounds like the zeros are at -5 and 0. That doesn't mean a point. These braces don't mean points. This means a solution set, or a set of answers. These parentheses mean actual coordinates that I can graph. So just be careful. They look very similar, but just be mindful. So this is what it looks like if you have 2 solutions. You pass through twice. The middle example is what it looks like if you have 1 solution. And so in this case, I only have 1 zero, or 1 root, or 1 solution, and it's right there, and I just marked it. And if I asked for that point, it just so happens that it's also our vertex, by the way. It's the lowest point. If this happens, then I have a root, or a 0, at 5. I have 1 solution. It's at 5. Now, if I asked you, well, can you give that to me as an x-intercept, or as an ordered pair, a coordinate, so I can find it on a grid? I could write it as 5, 0, but I would need to use parentheses. Depending on the question, this is one of those things that you want to read a question carefully so that I know that you know the answer, but I'm not going to assume that you do. If you slip up and include the wrong types of grouping symbols. So just be mindful. And then here's what it looks like if it has no solution. Okay, notice that our zeros or our roots or our solutions, it's where it passes the x-axis. And as I'm looking at it, well, here's your x-axis right here. And it's not touching it at all. We've completely missed it. So if this was the case, I would write, okay, there's no solution here. It's still a parabola, it's still a quadratic, but it just doesn't have a solution. So this would be, you couldn't write anything. It's not applicable. You can't write an x-intercept because we don't have one.